Today we're going to be covering part 2 of faith and belief in the workplace as it relates to innovation. Last time we talked about faith and belief as it pertains to being able to have faith in other people and belief in other people, and why that's so important in building a team, in building individual self-confidence, and why being able to demonstrate that you believe in others and their abilities is such an important skill to learn. Now, we didn't really touch on it last time, so I'll just kind of say this at the beginning of this section, part 2. The reason why faith and belief even needs to be discussed in the setting of the different qualities or traits that we need to develop to be effective at work is because as a whole, society has become more doubtful, more cynical, more critical. And as a society, that's the way people are in general. And so that's why we're talking about this idea of being able to believe in people, to have faith in other people. That's so important. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about faith and belief as it pertains to innovation. When people talk about innovation, many times they're talking about iteration. In other words, sometimes there'll be something and then you take a look at the next logical step, and then you take a look at the next logical step and they say, we're innovating, but actually they are iterating. So for example, there's an example that Guy Kawasaki uses about back in the old days, to get ice, they'd go out in the winter and they'd cut blocks of ice, and they would take these and bring them and store them in someplace cold, and then when people needed ice, they'd be able to deliver. And of course, the hard thing with that is during the summer, where do you get your ice, right? So eventually they made changes, and they found a way to have a cooling area where you can keep ice longer. But now you think about going from that, they had some logical steps. Innovation was when all of a sudden they were able to make their own ice by building machines that could freeze water. That's an innovation. But think about now, you can go to your refrigerator because now the innovation is taken away from that big factory and put into your refrigerator. So this is just an introduction to trying to understand the difference between iteration and true innovation. Because oftentimes innovation takes faith and belief. When you iterate, you're able to say, this is the next logical step, right? Logical step. So it is something that can be calculated, tested, validated, and will take that step. Some of the most powerful innovation, you can't do that. You just have to believe that what you're thinking, what you're planning, what you're trying to design, many times which hasn't even been done yet, is just going to be better. You as a person innovating have to believe it, and you have to get all your team to believe it and have faith in that idea. And so that's why faith and belief are very important. An example that Elon Musk likes to use is Henry Ford. You can imagine him, he's credited with the automobile, the first automobiles. So you can imagine him talking to his neighbor, and he says, I'm going to build this automobile. It's going to have a motor, and you're going to be able to sit in it. You won't need a horse, and it'll take you anywhere you go. And his neighbor might say, okay, so how much is it going to cost, this automobile? And whatever Henry Ford said was many times more than what it would cost for a team of horses. So they might say, why would I pay that much when I can have 5 horses or 6 horses for that cost? And I don't have to worry about any kind of gasoline or anything. My horses eat grass. So anyways, by the way, where's this gasoline going to come from? Well, there's going to be factories, and how we produce kerosene. There's going to be that type of thing. There's going to be gas. Well, you're going to have to carry this gas with you everywhere you go? No, there's going to be gas stations everywhere you go. And you can see his neighbors thinking, so you're telling me to spend all this money on something where I'm going to have to go out there and wait for these gasoline stations to pop up and wait for these roads to be smooth. That's never going to happen throughout the whole USA. That's not going to happen. So it wasn't the next logical step for many people to start using cars. But if today you saw someone driving around with a horse and buggy, you think they're crazy. Or at least you'd say, well, there's a better way to get around. And everything that Henry Ford said or envisioned would need to be there in order to support his automobile, that's commonplace now. Not just in the US, but around the world. But the point, again, is that it requires faith and belief to innovate. Make sure you understand the difference between iteration and innovation. Both of them will require for you to fail. Because sometimes you're saying, okay, we're going to do the next iteration, but it's not quite right, so you got to tweak it. With innovation, be prepared to fail more, to have to go back to the drawing board, to have to rethink, to have to rework, maybe even change an approach or direction. But to be an innovator, you need to believe in the vision. You need to have faith that whatever you're doing is worthwhile and will eventually benefit people. There's a saying that innovators are crazy until they're not. Be an innovator. Have faith, have belief in whatever you're doing. Also have the ability to help others develop that faith and belief in the mission. So just something to think about, how faith and belief are actually very much needed in the workplace, and especially to be a good innovator. Because again, so many people in the world are cynical. That's not going to work. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard. We've been doing this for years. This is just the way things get done. Be an innovator. So here's your metacognitive assignment. Try to think about something that was completely out of the question, maybe 100 years ago or 50 years ago, that you take for granted in everyday life. What type of mental step would have been required? What kind of faith, what kind of belief would have been required for that innovation to take place? And I'll just give you an example. So you can't use this one, you got to find another one. When you think about flight, there was a time when flight was something that people thought was completely impossible. But that innovation there, that belief that being able to fly was going to be beneficial, that was innovation. And think about how now when you travel, everyone uses planes to get our Prime packages from Amazon, planes. I hope this made sense. I hope you can see why it's good to be able to demonstrate that you believe in others and their abilities to believe in the vision and go after it. We'll talk to you next time.